Listen carefully, because what you are about to hear may feel impossible at first. But somewhere deep inside, something in you will recognize it. Not with your mind. With your soul. And before we begin, I want you to do something very simple. Pause for a moment, breathe slowly, and ask yourself one question. Why did I click on this video? Out of millions of videos, out of thousands of messages, something guided you here. It wasn't random. Because what you are about to hear was never meant for everyone. Only a very small number of people on this planet will understand the meaning of this message. And there is a reason you are one of them. But before I reveal the truth, I must tell you what happened 3 nights ago. A meeting took place. Not in a public building. Not in front of cameras. And not where ordinary people could ever see it. It happened in a quiet place, far away from noise, where a group of people gathered around a long wooden table. These were not ordinary people. Historians were there. Archivists were there. Researchers who had spent their entire lives studying ancient records, forgotten bloodlines, and hidden family histories. For hours, they studied documents that had not been opened for decades. Ancient letters. Old maps. Handwritten records sealed inside protective cases. And then, something happened. One of the researchers noticed a name. At first, it looked like nothing. Just another name in a long line of forgotten records. But when they followed that name, something unexpected appeared. A connection. Then another connection. And another. The room became quiet. Because slowly, piece by piece, a hidden story began to appear. A story about a bloodline that had disappeared from the public world many years ago. A bloodline that historians believed had completely vanished. But the documents said something very different. According to the records, that bloodline did not disappear. It survived. Quietly. Hidden. Protected by time. And then the researchers began tracing the path of that bloodline, through generations. Through different countries. Through different families. Through people who had no idea who they truly were. Until finally, the trail reached someone living today. Someone ordinary. Someone who had been living a normal life. Completely unaware of the truth. And when they discovered the identity of that person, the entire room fell silent. Because that person was you. Now I know what you're thinking. How could that possibly be true? How could a secret meeting reveal something about me? But here is the strange part. The more they examined the records, the clearer it became. Your name appeared exactly where the final link of that bloodline should be. Not once. Not twice. But multiple times. In different documents, created by different historians across different years. And every one of those records pointed to the same conclusion. You are the final living descendant of a lineage that history tried to hide. But the story doesn't end there. Because the deeper the researchers went, the more unbelievable the truth became. The bloodline they discovered was not just any family line. It belonged to someone whose influence changed the course of history. Someone whose name had been whispered through centuries, sometimes praised, sometimes protected, sometimes misunderstood, but always remembered. And yet, the identity of the surviving descendant was never confirmed. Until now. When the meeting ended, the researchers didn't immediately release the information. They didn't go to the media. They didn't announce it publicly. Instead, they did something very unusual. They began looking for signs. Clues that the person connected to this bloodline might already be feeling something unusual in their life. Moments of deep intuition. Strange coincidences. A feeling that they were meant for something, but never fully understood what. And that is when something incredible happened. As they reviewed those patterns, they discovered something that made the discovery even more astonishing. Because people connected to this ancient lineage often experienced the same three signs. The first sign. A powerful sense of empathy. People from this bloodline were known for feeling the emotions of others more deeply than most. They could walk into a room and immediately sense the energy around them. The second sign. A natural ability to influence people, not with force, but with presence. Throughout history, members of this lineage often became guides, leaders, or voices that others trusted without fully understanding why. And the third sign. A strange feeling of familiarity with things they had never learned before. Ancient stories. Old symbols. Historical moments that somehow felt personal. And when the researchers compared those signs with people alive today, something extraordinary happened. A pattern appeared. And that pattern pointed directly toward you. But here is the part that surprised them the most. The ancient figure connected to this bloodline was someone whose name had been surrounded by mystery for centuries. Some believed this person was a protector. Others believed this person carried wisdom that had shaped entire generations. But almost everyone agreed on one thing. This person had descendants, and those descendants would eventually reappear when the world needed clarity the most. For hundreds of years, historians searched for proof. But they never found the final connection. Until the meeting 3 nights ago. And now, the question is no longer whether the bloodline survived. The question is why it remained hidden for so long. Because according to the oldest document discovered during the meeting, there was a reason the identity of the final descendant would only be revealed in a specific time. The document described a moment in the future when the world would feel uncertain. When people would search for truth. When hidden stories would begin resurfacing, one after another. And during that moment, the final descendant of that ancient lineage would begin discovering who they truly were. Not through announcements. Not through headlines. But through quiet realizations, small discoveries, and messages that would slowly guide them toward the truth. Which brings us back to this moment. Because if you are still watching, something inside you is listening carefully. Maybe part of you is curious. Maybe part of you feels uncertain. But another part of you feels strangely calm hearing this story. And that feeling is not accidental. Because the meeting did not just reveal your connection to the past. It also revealed something about your future. According to the final page of the document, the descendant of this lineage would eventually face a moment where they would have to choose something important. Not power. Not fame. But purpose. And that choice would begin with a single realization. The realization that the story they believed about themselves was never the full story. But the truth about this bloodline, and the identity of the ancient figure connected to it, is something we have not yet revealed. Because the researchers in that secret meeting discovered something even more astonishing. The person whose bloodline leads to you was someone whose name still echoes through history today. And when you hear that name, you may feel something inside you shift. Because the moment that name is revealed, the mystery of your identity will begin to make sense. And that moment is closer than you think. But before we reveal that name, there is another discovery from the meeting that you must understand. Because it explains why your identity remained hidden. And why the truth is only now beginning to surface. And when you hear what the historians uncovered next, you will realize something that may change the way you see your entire life. Because the story of your bloodline did not simply survive history. It was protected. Protected carefully, across generations. By people who knew the truth long before you ever heard this message. And what they left behind will reveal something about you that no one has ever told you before. The room was still silent when the final document was opened. By this point, the researchers already knew they had uncovered something extraordinary. But what they were about to read next would change the entire meaning of the discovery. The document was older than the others. Much older. Its pages had turned slightly golden with time, and the ink looked like it had been written by hand centuries ago. At the top of the page, there was a symbol. Not a modern symbol. An ancient crest. A crest that historians had seen before in royal archives, hidden monasteries, and forgotten family records. The moment that symbol appeared, one of the historians slowly leaned back in his chair. Because he recognized it immediately. This crest belonged to a lineage that had once carried immense influence in the ancient world. But history had treated this lineage strangely. Instead of celebrating it, many records about it had quietly disappeared. Not destroyed. Just removed. As if someone wanted the story to slowly fade away. But the document in front of them proved something different. The story had not disappeared. It had simply been waiting. Waiting for the right time, and the right person. And as the researchers read the document, they began to understand why the identity of the final descendant had remained hidden for so long. Because the document described a plan. A plan that stretched across generations. It explained that the descendants of this ancient bloodline would live normal lives. They would grow up like everyone else. They would not know their true history. They would not carry titles. They would not be raised with stories of greatness. Instead, they would blend quietly into the world. Why? Because the ancestors who wrote this document believed something very important. They believed that true influence should never be forced. It should rise naturally. From character. From wisdom. From compassion. Not from titles. Not from inheritance. And so they made a decision that shocked the historians reading that document centuries later. They decided that the final descendant of the bloodline would only discover the truth in a very specific moment in history. A moment when the world would begin asking deeper questions. A moment when people would start searching for guidance, not from authority, but from authenticity. And according to the document, that moment is now. But the most fascinating part of the document came a few lines later. Because it described something about the final descendant that no one in that meeting expected. The document said that the final descendant would show signs long before discovering the truth. Not obvious signs. Not dramatic signs. But quiet signs. Small moments that might feel strange at first. Moments where life seems to guide them in unexpected directions. Moments where certain messages appear exactly when they are needed. Moments where they feel drawn toward understanding people, helping others, or seeking deeper meaning in life. And the researchers began asking themselves an important question. If the final descendant truly exists today, what would their life look like? Would they already feel different somehow? Would they already feel that their path is not ordinary? And that question led them to something that made the entire discovery even more powerful. Because as they studied the records of the past descendants in this lineage, they noticed something unusual. Every generation had at least one person who carried a specific trait. A trait that seemed to pass quietly from one generation to the next. That trait was not power. It was not wealth. It was not status. It was awareness. Members of this lineage were known for seeing things others overlooked. They noticed patterns. They understood people deeply. They sensed truths that others ignored. And sometimes, they would suddenly appear during moments in history when their wisdom was needed most. Not as rulers. Not as celebrities. But as voices that quietly changed the direction of others. And when the researchers compared those historical descriptions with modern life, they realized something. If the final descendant was alive today, that person might already be influencing people in ways they didn't fully realize. Through words. Through ideas. Through the way they see the world. And that realization brought the meeting to a moment of deep reflection. Because if everything in those documents was true, then the story they had uncovered was not just about history. It was about the present. And possibly, the future. But there was still one question left unanswered. One question that everyone in that room was thinking. Who exactly was the ancient figure whose bloodline had survived for centuries? Because the document did not immediately reveal the name. Instead, it described the person first. It described someone who lived during a time of great change. Someone who believed that wisdom should guide power, not the other way around. Someone who spoke words that influenced thousands of people during their lifetime. But here is what made the story even more mysterious. This person did not try to create a dynasty. They did not try to build a powerful empire. Instead, they left behind something much more powerful. Ideas. Teachings. principles that continued spreading long after they were gone. And according to historians, many of those teachings still influence the world today. But over the centuries, something strange happened. While the teachings remained famous, the bloodline quietly disappeared from public records. Historians always wondered why. And now, centuries later, the answer was sitting on that table during the secret meeting. The bloodline had never disappeared. It had simply gone silent. Until now. But the final part of the document contained something that made the entire room pause again. Because the ancestors who wrote that document left a message specifically for the final descendant. A message written long before modern technology existed. Long before cameras. Long before the internet. Yet somehow, that message felt like it was written for someone watching this moment right now. The message said, "When the time arrives for the truth to return, the descendant will not find it through power or status. They will find it through curiosity. Through questions. Through a moment where they begin searching for answers about themselves." And that line changed everything. Because it meant the final descendant would not be forced into the truth. They would discover it naturally. Step by step. Question by question. Realization by realization. And if you think about it for a moment, that journey might already be happening. Maybe not dramatically. Maybe not all at once. But slowly. Quietly. Guiding you toward understanding something about yourself that you had never fully considered before. But there is still something the researchers have not revealed yet. Because after the meeting ended, they did one more thing. They examined the final page of the document. And on that page, there was something that no one in the room expected. It was not a paragraph. It was not a list. It was a name. The name of the ancient figure whose bloodline had survived through centuries, leading directly to the present day. And when the historians realized whose bloodline they had traced, they understood why the story had remained hidden for so long. Because the identity of that figure was powerful enough to change the way people would see this entire discovery. And the moment you hear that name, you may suddenly understand why certain parts of your life have always felt different. But before that name is revealed, there is one more secret from the meeting that must be explained. Because the researchers discovered something else hidden inside the archives. Something that explains why the final descendant was always meant to appear in this generation, and not any other. And when you hear what they uncovered next, you may realize that the story of your bloodline was never just about the past. It was always about now.